I'm Justin Vacula, host of this podcast. I'm the co-organizer, spokesperson, and a board member of the NEPA Freethought Society.
I'm Rodney, the founder and board chairman of the NEPA Freethought Society. I'm also active in local church-state separation issues.
The NEPA Freethought Society is a secular discussion and activist group located in the northeastern Pennsylvania area. The group is intended to be a coalition of non-believers comprised of atheists, secular humanists, skeptics, agnostics, etc., predicated on support and community. The group gathers monthly to discuss any pertinent issues and fully intends on defending the rights of the secular when and where appropriate. We maintain that the separation of church and state is important, and critical thinking should be prevalent in all areas of life. More information about the NEPA Freethought Society, including upcoming meetings, special guest speaker appearances, and much more, can be found at nepafreethought.org. Our podcast is available for free on the iTunes Store and through nepafreethought.org. You can also subscribe through an RSS feed on our website. Our live stream page, including a schedule of upcoming episodes, archived videos, and live streaming videos, can be found at nepafreethought.org/news/livestream. Today we're going to talk about a previous podcast and event we had on December 19th of 2011 and our upcoming advertising campaign coming to Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania. Reverend Marcel Dotson of Field of Grace, Community of Faith United Methodist Church, joined us to debate on the topic of Does the Christian God Exist this past December. She, of course, argued in the affirmative and I argued in the negative. The event, for my estimation, went really well and a constructive, respectful dialogue was had. The event was the first of its kind in my area, to my knowledge, and was a great educational experience for both theists and non-theists. Of course, as you might expect, not everything discussed in the debate could be discussed at length in the debate, so we're going to talk about this in today's episode. To provide a quick summary, most of the debate seemed to consist of different approaches to knowing. Marcel's main arguments for the Christian God relied on personal experience and an appeal to the unknown, or mystery. I argued that the problem of natural evil and the inductive argument for naturalism should serve as a defeater of Christian belief, and also challenged Marcel to argue why belief in an all-loving God is profoundly more reasonable than belief in an all-evil God. I argued that the profoundly irrational belief in an all-evil God is no more reasonable than an all-loving God, thus belief in an all-loving God is profoundly irrational. While we will talk about these points during the podcast, I'd like to start discussing some of the more interesting claims that Marcel brought up that went largely unaddressed because they didn't have much of anything, from my perspective, to do with the debate. After the 11-minute mark in the audio-only version of the debate, Marcel began to talk about atrocities committed on black persons by white persons and said, quote, "There is no logical reason for me to have anything to do with white people," unquote, and, quote, "only by God," unquote, is she able to have a reason to trust white people. What's your take on that, Rodney?
Well, from what I heard, it seemed to me that Marcel was trying to say that without her belief in a God, her faith in this God, that she would be a racist. So it seems to me she was saying that she couldn't, that she had bias in her, but her religious beliefs allowed her to, I guess, get around these biases.
Well, the one thing she mentioned in the podcast was about how these experiments were had, and she said she had every reason not to trust white people.
She didn't go into detail about that, though. She pretty much mentioned it and just went to the next, what she had to say about it. I know she did mention something about the experiments done on her family members. She didn't specify what these experiments were, when they took place, who did them, anything like that. But, excuse me, whatever she was talking about, I don't understand how it had anything to do with the here and the now and how she basically would get along with other people based on how they treat her here and now. Not what happened to her family members years ago. I would assume this was years ago that she's talking about, and maybe some atrocities that may have happened that she either witnessed or was privy to have knowledge of. So I don't know. Like I said, she wasn't specific, but at the same time, to say that without a belief in any specific belief, religion or denomination, you cannot be free of being a racist, then I think something's pretty wrong with that.
Well, I mean, you, of course, are an African-American atheist, and you don't have a belief in God, but, of course, you trust white people,
I trust people who I think I can trust. So it doesn't matter what their color is, it matters what their content is. If I get to know people by spending time with them. I can't look at someone and say I distrust them because of their color, or their skin, or what they're wearing, or what the style their hair is. I have to spend some time with them to get to know them, what their views are, and how they treat people. Basically, that's what it comes down to. Well, as I said before, for someone to say, and it was kind of shocking that they could not be without a belief in a God, they could not have relations with white people. To me, that was pretty telling of basically how somebody is rather than what they claim to be because of a belief.
Well, maybe she thinks that people can, African Americans can trust white people regardless of whether they believe in God or not, but perhaps for her, maybe she says that her belief in God is what allows her to bridge that gap. So what would your response be to that?
Well, if that's what she needs to be open, well, I guess not even open-minded. I couldn't say that. That's what she needs to be able to cope with white America, I guess. Okay. I guess that's what she needs. I don't understand why she needs that. Once again, she didn't specify that she had personally had a lot of issues with Caucasians in her lifetime, that they did things to her. Okay, she didn't mention anything like that. She mentioned relatives. And she also, I believe she mentioned something about the Ku Klux Klan also. So she's talking about people, I guess, who did things in the past who were notorious for doing things against minorities, African Americans in this respect, or African slaves. But she wasn't talking about herself. So I guess what she wants to do is carry on some sort of resentment towards a specific group based on what other people did years and years ago.
Well, I mean, even if these experiments did in fact happen, and even if white persons did really bad things against African Americans, it wouldn't lead her to the conclusion that she can't trust all white people, right? It would only be those white people involved with those groups or those specific individuals, right? I mean, to go across.
It shouldn't lead her to that conclusion. Like I said, I can't speak for her because we didn't get a chance to get into detail with her, but I can't really get to the bottom of what the issues are for her. But it sounds like trust is an issue, and as I said before, she didn't specify if there was anything done to her that gave her reason not to trust anybody Caucasian. So if she's just going by what she claims someone did to someone else, I mean, even if it wasn't somebody else, if somebody did something to her was Caucasian, it would be that person, that individual, not the whole race. Okay, so if you can stereotype a whole race, to me, is kind of ignorant.
Well, one thing that was interesting, she was talking a lot about faith, and her belief was based on faith, and she was saying faith in different contexts. She mentioned she had faith in God, but she also said that she had faith that she would be safe in Mountaintop, where we recorded the debate. And she mentioned that she was weary of quote-unquote white people, end quote, and then ended up in a room with not just 2 white guys, but 3 white guys. As she mentioned this in the podcast, so she made the comments earlier, but now here's another comment. So it seems like what she was doing here was she was trying to say that these are the same kinds of faith, but as I mentioned in the debate, I mean, faith, belief in God, whatever you happen to call it, is a lot different than expecting that Mountaintop would be a safe place or that she would be safe in this debate. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, before she even came to Mountaintop to participate in the debate, I would think she would have done some investigating to find out more about who we were, who you are, our history. If she was to go and meet us here in Mountaintop, that would it be would it be likely that somebody in our group would be waiting to do something to her? Does she hear anything about our group being radical? If she did look into something like that, I think she wouldn't have heard anything negative to that nature. But to say that she came anyway and that her faith led her here, I don't think that was really the case. Like I said, I think that, given the fact we're a very public group, everybody knows about us, so we're not just out there. She only knew about us, and we had set a trap for her to show up here, and we want to pounce on her or anything like that. But I don't think you need a faith to join somebody in an event. I think, like I said, a little bit of inquiry and investigation will lead you to either not go or go.
Right, and the interesting thing was that this event was heavily advertised beforehand. We also recorded it live and everything like that. I'm sure she notified people where she would be And, it would be pretty obvious if there were going to be any foul play that we'd be the persons behind it. So, I mean, she had every reason to think that she'd come here and come to the debate and we'd have the discussion and everything. It's not really so much of a faith claim, or at least not a faith at the same level of belief in God. I mean, because with this belief in God, she was presenting reasons in the debate, of course, but they were very different than the quote-unquote faith that she had to come to the debate. She was talking about how, God lives in possibilities, and, we can't know God's ways and things like that. I mean, but for the debate, she had every reason to believe that she would be safe. It wasn't so much of a faith claim at all.
Mm-hmm. Everything would lead you to believe she'd be safe, or lead her to believe that. That would seem to be the way it is to me, rather than she had any reason to believe something will happen to her harmful.
Well, it was interesting because during the question and answer session, you weren't able to make it to the debate that day because it was in the afternoon. It was pretty early in the day. You were occupied, and the one question you had for her is, right, if she thought that Christianity was helpful for African Americans. Mm-hmm. And she had mentioned that faith in the Christian God helped black persons escape slavery, and those who were not slaves can't talk about the matter unless they were slaves, responding to my assertion that faith in God wasn't needed for persons to escape slavery or for persons to have rational reasons to argue against it. So, what's your take on that?
Okay, well, first, where Marcel said that slaves needed a belief in God to, I guess, have the willpower to escape slavery, I don't understand that. I don't understand how somebody is aware of the fact that they're being mistreated. And in this case, they were being mistreated, I guess you could say, extremely badly. They were slaves, so they had no rights. They had to do what they were told to do, work every day, work hard, living in deplorable conditions. That wasn't enough for somebody to say, I don't want to be here. They had to have a belief in a God to say, I need to get out of here. And the slave master is beating me. He's whipping me. I watched him hang some other blacks, some other slaves. They got me working for nothing other than what it is they're feeding me. Like I said, living in deplorable conditions. I knew they had lived in slave quarters. They weren't wearing the best of clothing, of course, also. And even though it may have been hot down south, but they still had the worst of everything. So I don't think anybody needed to be, I guess you could say, needed any type of encouragement to run away, to flee these conditions because they had a belief in any God. I don't think that was necessary whatsoever. And as far as what you said, where she mentioned that you weren't there, you didn't personally experience any of this slavery. And I believe she said something about you didn't know anybody or none of your relatives happened to be slaves either, so they couldn't hand down that information to you. Once again, if you have any type of humanity to you and you recognize pain and suffering, you can see and somewhat feel what's going on in certain circumstances. In this case, it's pretty clear and evident these people were being downtrodden and that they were suffering. So you don't need to be there and be one of the people who's being beaten down and downtrodden, or have somebody in your family who was a slave. You don't need that to be the case. If, like I said, if you can see with your own eyes and listen and understand and have feeling, then you can pretty much be on the same page as them and say, well, that's not right, and I can understand somebody wanting to get away from that and fighting that. So I don't know where she got that from. As far as you weren't there, you didn't experience it. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I guess what she was trying to go with is that certain people in certain situations, it's hard to experience what they're experiencing, and these people needed the belief to get out of that, cope with the situation, or have a reason to go against it. Of course, as I mentioned in the debate, not all slaves were believers in God. So how did those other people get out, or how did they have the willpower to do it? And I guess the response then at that point would be something like, well, for those people, they needed that. But I find that kind of suspect. I don't think that they would have needed that. Perhaps they could have had another way, right?
I guess if that was the case, I would assume that the ones who didn't have a belief in God were the first ones to get away.
And interestingly enough, she says about how Christianity was helpful for African Americans in this sense to get out of slavery, but wasn't Christianity one of the culprits to begin with, where preachers were looking at the Bible and using the Bible to justify slavery?
Yes, most definitely. It's amazing to me how somebody can justify something by looking in the Bible, even though it's horrific, and then turn around and say, well, yes, I understand this is wrong. I have morals. I can understand this is wrong. But this is my good book. It's in there. So I understand both sides of the coin. But in her case, where she tried to say that, in her case, where she is now a pastor, she's a pastor, correct, of a Methodist church, that's in the Bible that she shouldn't have that type of position as a female, correct? I can't think of the exact verse.
Yeah, Paul wrote about that, how women should be silent in church and not have authority over men.
Okay. So, once again, there's contradiction going on here from a believer who says that it's all true. They fully believe in the Word, and the exact same book they say is all true and they fully believe in says you have no business being in the position that you're in.
Well, I mean, even inside the Bible, it says that all Scripture is perfect and fine for reproduction. The Word of God shall stand forever. The Bible is the word of the Lord, etc. But I guess what the people say is, well, you're either taking it out of context, or you're not fully understanding, or you need a theologian to decipher this, or something else. So perhaps they'll say, well, in that time that was just Paul's view, and that wasn't the word of God. That was just Paul's view who said those things about women, because that was that time, and that's what he thought.
Well, we all know, that I would have to think that if God was aware of everything and that Paul was going to put that in the Bible and it was incorrect, that God would have corrected that. Okay, unless God, once again, does nothing but sit back and just fold his hands together and just do nothing. If someone was going to put something in the Bible that said women were no good and here's their place, they should be silent and submissive, so on and so forth. If that was incorrect and God was all-knowing and God could see the future and know that would be hurtful to women in the future, I would think that God would have done something about that if he was this all-loving being that they claim he is also. So that's not how it works, though. That's not the case. So once again, like I said, if when someone comes along, in this case, Reverend Dotson or Pastor Dotson says that she's a firm believer in the Word and this is what it does for her, it's amazing how she will rely on the book to say it's the greatest book, but the same book is telling you have no business being in the position you're in, speaking up for it.
Well, there's obviously a lot of sort of picking and choosing that goes on with a lot of the verses, where you'll take the things you like and discard the rest, and all the other stuff is either out of context, that wasn't the right verse, it was human error. And I've even heard from some people that human error is what shows that the Bible's actually the Word of God, because humans are imperfect. You can't expect a perfect book. But then yet at the same time it's inspired by God. But they'll contend that God didn't actually write the Bible, but he just gave inspiration for the writers, and it's supposed to be a human narrative, and since humans are flawed, there have to be flaws in the Bible.
Well, that would mean that the Bible, that anybody that follows the Bible is taking the word of man and not God, then if they looked at it that way. And since they know that man is flawed, that there should be things in there which you can pretty much look at and see clearly that are wrong. Good and plenty of things that we know are wrong, and turn around and say, well, why would I need this book when the book was written so long ago that they didn't really know much at the time? Why would I want to follow this in today's modern society? Try and apply it to the here and now. It doesn't make any sense to me, other than the fact that for some reason it makes them feel good about themselves. I can't understand what it's good for.
Well, what's interesting is earlier you talked about how God would just sit back and let all this stuff happen, and one of the main things I had in the debate that I kept mentioning during the rebuttals was a criticism of Marcel's version of God that she was bringing up in the debate, because we had agreed beforehand to talk about the Christian God, and of course the definition would be all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing, and she kept talking in generic terms about a creator, about an intelligence, about some kind of being, but I kept asking, how do you know he's all-loving? How do you know he's all-powerful? How do you know he's all-knowing? And I didn't really get too much of a response to that. So that was a big problem, because in the debate, that's the contention she had to defend. And I don't feel she did that. She never really go to explain any of the omni terms, but rather was just talking a lot about a being and a generic thing.
She was giving statements instead of addressing the questions you had. Yeah, I noticed that as well. I assume she heard everything you said as far as the questions you put to her. Either she wasn't able to answer them because she didn't have the answers, or she didn't want to answer them. One of the two.
She wasn't talking about specific. She was just talking about a generic creator.
Well, I guess she couldn't be specific then. I guess she had to go around, always keep going around what you were asking her, or the specific issue. Because, like I said, I don't recall her ever getting to the crux of any questions you posed.
Yeah, she was talking a lot about how this being creates order out of disorder and harmony, and the harmony contention was pretty interesting because I mentioned the problem of natural evil, of course, which posits that stuff like earthquakes, malaria, tsunamis, etc., are incompatible with belief in all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing being. Mm-hmm. We would expect that there wouldn't have to be just a reason, but a very, very good reason, and to justify those. But we didn't get one of those during the debate, and I kept challenging her to provide a reason. And I also had the evil God challenge to show why an all-loving being is more rational to believe in than an all-evil being. And we didn't really hear anything addressing that either. And she was mentioning about how, our cognitive capacity is limited and we can't understand God and everything like that. And I rebutted with the problems of that. This you can't know the mind of God defense is, what I called it during the debate and elsewhere in what I've written. And the problem is, if you see a tremendous amount of evidence to contradict or serve as a defeater for one of your beliefs, what you should do is give up the belief, not say about how there could be, for all we know, this reason that's outside of our understanding. Mm-hmm. It's pretty similar to if you had someone who you thought was a good friend and you found out that he had stolen things off of you, he had, say, abused children at a daycare, he's killed animals, just heap on this list. You're not going to say, well, for all we know, he could have had a good reason to do it, or, we've just been fooled, or, all these other defenses. And I see this as a really similar analogy to this we can't know the mind of God defense, or anything along those lines. I mean, of course, humans are different than a supposed God, but in the same way, if you find evidence that goes against your belief, you should give up the belief if it serves as good enough reason to do so.
Well, I'd like to know how it is if she says we can't know the mind of God, that she believes that she knows the mind of God. I mean, unless she's talking about you and I don't know the mind of God, or is she speaking for herself as well? I don't know. If she was speaking for herself as well, then I guess she'd be being truthful to some extent by admitting that, at least, if there ever was a God, that she doesn't know his mind. But I don't know either if that's which way she meant that to go. So once again, we can't get down to the bottom of it without talking to her herself and asking her exactly what she meant. But as far as the scapegoat goes, we don't know the mind of God. Therefore, that's why things go on and we can't explain it. That's a cop out. That's somebody turning away from all the evidence and all the proof and the arguments just to say, I guess, because it makes them feel better, that must be what they really want things to be like. To sit there and say, in the face of all that, well, we can't know the mind of God, therefore you can't evaluate or judge anything like that.
Well, it's not really addressing the argument either, because you would have to attack.
Address it, of course.
You would have to attack one of the premise. I mean, no one's going to deny that earthquakes and natural disasters and everything like that exist. And the second contention is, it's just incompatible with belief in God.
Would you consider it to be an actual debate if the person you're supposed to be debating isn't actually giving you the other side of the argument? If they're just sitting there telling you, well, here's what it is, I say it's this, I say it is that, but they're never actually addressing any argument you make. I can't. To me, it doesn't seem like it's really a debate. Actually, it seems to me as though personally that maybe Reverend Marcel didn't understand your arguments. Possibly she didn't understand them. Maybe she just wasn't aware of these type of arguments. Never encountered these type of arguments. Never thought about these types of arguments. And that was left her in a position where she couldn't debate.
Well, I mean, the evil God challenge is relatively new. It was posed by Stephen Law famously pretty recently, and before that it's gone back about 20 years. But the thing that was interesting is I have my published work out there on my blog, on my articles, and other contributions, and she was very much aware of those. So I didn't throw anything new into the debate. I was considering maybe using different arguments, such as the problem of theological fatalism, just arguments against miracles in general, specifically from a David Hume perspective, but I didn't really want to go with that for this debate. I already had a written debate a few months back, and she knew very much of this, and she actually had read the debate, so she could have been more prepared for the debate. Although before she said, debating wasn't so much of her thing. I think she actually said this during the debate, and, she was certainly courageous to accept it. We'll give her that. But she was definitely very aware of the arguments. I mean, as far as the problem of evil is concerned, that's been around for quite a long time, and that's usually what, one objection that Christians would be very much aware of, regardless of how they would happen to answer it or deal with it. But this whole thing of, for all we know, God could have a reason that's just beyond us is, what's called ad hoc in philosophy. It's unfalsifiable, and it's just this move to try to defend it. But what reason is there for this defense? It's just like, well, for all we know, and I brought this up in the debate, we could have been created last Thursday with pre-programmed memories and holes in our socks. We could propose these skeptical problems all day. Why don't we believe in them? Well, we don't believe these things because we don't find good reason to do so. And the same thing with the problem of evil. We see that there's a tremendous amount of evidence to undermine this belief in an all-loving God, but yet there's this defense of, well, for all we know, God could have a reason, it's part of God's plan, whatever, and those don't work. It's interesting because many other theists on this matter will say things like, well, humanity has fallen and that's why natural disasters happen, and God is actually just in doing this, and the point of life isn't to avoid evil, it's to know God, and you get all sorts of different defenses. But in this case, she followed a different path. None of those defenses, I think, work, of course, but that was the way she went in the debate.
Sounds like wishful thinking to me. If someone tells me that they would, or something sounds good to them, sounds great to them, and there's no proof for it, and they'll sit there and tell you, well, it gives me pleasure in my life. I get plenty of joy from this. I can't prove it that God exists, and I can't show you anything, but I believe in it, and it makes me feel good. That might be the case. It might make them feel good, while at the same time it could be a negative impact on someone else who doesn't believe in it. And for those who do, who don't really consider the non-believer and how they might be impacting their lives, I think more consideration should go into that when it comes to so-called atheists and their beliefs, the varied beliefs.
Well, it's often the case that the reasons for the belief in God come after the belief itself, right? People at an early age, and especially this is how I was and how many other people in this country were, we were going to some kind of Catholic school or religious school, whatever background people happen to have been exposed to because their parents were of a certain religion. And I wasn't told, here's the good reason to believe and here's why you should believe and now make a decision about it or anything like that. No, this is true, and you're going to go to hell if you disobey, and God is loving and Jesus died on the cross for your sins. And even in kindergarten, we were learning about these things about hell and Jesus dying for sins, and how in first grade even we had to go to reconciliation and confess our sins to a priest as first graders. So it seems a little bit odd there. And I remember when I was a theist, a lot of defenses I would use were these jerk gut reactions. Oh, that's why it's faith for a reason, things like that. I had never really thought about it until my beliefs were actually challenged. And no matter from what perspective people are coming into the debate, when they happen to be in the audience, I would hope that people, both non-believers and believers alike, or whatever else happens to fall in, would think about these issues and consider why they believe what they believe or don't. And I think it could be helpful.
How it affects others too, possibly.
Right. Well, it's an often heard claim that beliefs are just personal matters, and what I do doesn't have effect on others as far as beliefs are concerned, but it's not true. Beliefs inform actions.
Well, I can understand a theist who's never been exposed to the arguments, making the claims they make and telling people about how wonderful it is. I can see that. Once again, though, just like as they tell us, well, once you've been exposed to the Word of God and refuse it or reject it, that you'll pay for that later, that you're gonna wish you had of. And I've always said that if somebody is living a life where, in my opinion, they're delusional, that they're living a life based on invisible beings and belief systems that were jotted down thousands of years ago by primitive people who didn't have knowledge that we have now, that to me they wouldn't have a full life, and they would have issues going on in their lives that they wouldn't normally have if they had, at least would try and take a look at the other side and see, well, what is this really about versus what I think I know. So no matter how often, no matter how much someone tells me that they're open-minded, when the debates come up and someone puts their evidence forth and you weigh them out, and at the same time, like I said, I know plenty of Christians and theists, period, who they're good people, but at the same time they'll tell me about all their problems they're having in life and that they can't pay this bill or this note or something because it's hard times. And you'll see the exact same issues come up with them that you would with anyone else, regardless of their belief in a God who looks after them, takes care of them because they worship Him. So as far as the theist saying that this works for them and it's wonderful for them, I understand once again where they're coming from, because that fills them with joy and happiness, and I guess it makes their day every day of the week that they can look forward to believing in this being. But at the same time, it has other effects, not only on other people, but on them as well. Well, that'd be another conversation, I guess.
Yeah, well, as far as, why people believe or anything like that, outside of the reasons or whatever emotions are concerned, I tend to stay away from those because it could be all sorts of different reasons, and regardless of whether they believe because it makes them happy. I mean, there's one thing in philosophy called the Gettier problem, and long story short there, you can happen to have a belief in something, and that thing could turn out to be true for the wrong reasons. So, for example, these people could believe in God because they think it makes them happy, and then it turns out that the reasons were inadequate, but God happened to exist anyway. So I'm more worried about the arguments for why the belief is justified anyway. But the whole, it works for me thing, one thing that came up in the debate, I was mentioning other religions, and basically how do you know the Christian God is true and more reasonable than the Hindu gods or anything like that. She was talking about, or Marcel was talking about personal experience a lot throughout the debate, and she has had some kind of personal experience that warrants her belief in God, I believe was one thing that came up.
She didn't specify what the personal experience was.
I don't recall. But throughout the debate, I said things like, well, Hindus are going to make the same claims. So the Hindu says that this experience makes me believe in Shiva. You say it makes you believe in Jesus. They can't all be true. So how is one more true than another? How do you know? You're dismissing others' experiences. And then she tried, well, I'm not Hindu, or I've never really met a Hindu before. But that doesn't really answer the objection here. Because what seems to be happening is that people are seeing ambiguous stimuli, and they're having these ambiguous experiences, and they're reasoning from these experiences that their particular religion is true.
No, that's what they believe. I guess to clarify what I said before, what I meant was if someone told you, if you were a theist, that your beliefs are harming other people, and we're able to actually break down what it was your beliefs were doing to other people, I should think that if you had actual concern for other human beings, you would want to look into these claims, these accusations, and try to see what's going on. And if it was true, if there's any truth to them, you would try to make some changes rather than keep going on saying, no, God is real. I know He is. It makes me happy. I mean, like you said before, it's all about the arguments, of course, what it comes down to, what the reasons are for the belief. Anybody can claim anything, but what I respect or don't respect is the reason for the belief. So that's what it would boil down to. Once again, we really didn't get to, like you said, where there was a time constraint involved with the debate, so you couldn't get down to the crux of things with Marcel and ask her more in-depth questions about her specific, belief system.
Well, what's interesting is that Marcel, like I said, agreed to have the debate, and that's all great, and I'm very happy about that, of course. But it's often the case that other theists aren't so willing to have the discussion, where to the point of, well, they'll make statements in public or on their internet profiles or anything like that, and then when you happen to call them out on it, or if you were to have a discussion even face-to-face about these issues, from one moment, as you posted in a forum post earlier, that they go from onward Christian soldiers to boo-hoo-hoo, I'm crying and don't want to have the discussion, you've hurt my feelings, you've offended me, even when one can be as mild as possible. So it's interesting that Marcel was able and willing to sit through this debate and have a discussion about these issues, and no one walked away saying, hey, I was offended, you were rude to me, you were disrespectful, anything like that. And we had the respectful conversation. But unfortunately, that breaks down elsewhere, and people want to pull these I have the right to my opinion cards and respect my beliefs, and you should challenge, and you should leave me alone, and everything like that. So where do you think it breaks down? And if these people believe that their faith is so strong and important and everything like that, you mentioned earlier about how these people say it brings them happiness and everything like that. Well, don't you think that they would be able to dictate it exactly why it is that they believe what they believe and try to, quote unquote, save us?
Well, that's the point, though. It brings them happiness up until the point where somebody questions it. Then they become unhappy.
Well, I mean, I value truth, and you mentioned before, if you have a belief that can harm others, I mean, wouldn't you want to know about that? That look into things and see whether it's justified. You would think, and I think it's pretty valuable to hold justified true beliefs and understand our reasons for doing so, especially when those beliefs can harm others.
I guess they look at it like this, rather than them saying, okay, this guy Vacula is trying to educate me. They're probably saying that you're trying to ruin things for them. You're trying to spoil the party, rather than you're trying to educate. You're just here you're a spoiler.
I wonder what happened to this idea that faith that is strong can withstand any test, and it's admirable to have faith even when your beliefs are challenged. I mean, don't you think that someone responding to a challenge, no matter how mild it is, would respond and say, oh, I'm proud to be a Christian, and I'm happy I go to church, and I'm happy I do this and that, instead of this whole running away kind of deal?
Well, they do make the claims that they're happy, and they're happy, but the minute...
Happy, joy.
The minute they're challenged, there's no more happiness. That I've seen this far too many times. People are willing to come up to me out of the blue sky and tell me about the happiness that they feel inside from knowing their Lord and Savior. And do I believe, and do I want to attend church with them? And you know how it goes. But the minute I say, well, no, I don't really want to attend church, and I don't believe in that, and here's why, and let me ask you this or that or the other, then you automatically see them going from this happy person to a frustrated person all of a sudden. At least that's the way it looks to me. Like you're frustrating them because you're asking them questions they don't normally hear. I think that normally they're around people who just agree with them, and that's what they're used to. So the minute you come along with the flip side, and it's not what they want to hear, that's upsetting to them. As far as I'm concerned, it's childish, because if you were an open-minded adult, you wouldn't get upset. You would evaluate what's being said, and if it had any truth to it, you would either utilize it or not utilize it, but either way, you wouldn't get upset about it.
I think the intellectually honest adult response would be to want to have the discussion and look at it as a learning experience and a chance to grow, understand others. But like you said, is it the case they're really aware of the arguments? Because it appears not to be the case. When I meet some theists and they try Pascal's wager or just some really, really bad arguments, or they'd be unaware of some of the arguments I would bring up. It's just really bizarre that they really haven't investigated these things.
Or so they say. If a person wants to know what they're talking about, they would look into it. As far as a person telling us what they believe and hoping that we would just take their word for it and just adhere to whatever it is they believe in, that's kind of ridiculous. We're adults. We shouldn't just jump into something because someone says so.
Yeah.
There's way too many more variables involved in that. But if somebody tells me that they believe in something and it's the truth, it's a real deal, but to me it sounds outlandish, I have to question it. if I don't question it and I stand there and look them in their face and I'm grinning and telling them, yeah, I'm with you, that to me that's being phony, and that's not my pedigree. Okay, if you want to call it that, being just grinning and smiling and then so on and so forth like that. I see this way too often from like I said, plenty of theist acquaintances who are just happy with the regular verbatim stuff they run around saying and doing and never being challenged. If a theist was truly interested in my salvation or your salvation, why would they not want to have the discussion? Okay, if that was really the goal, to bring souls to heaven so we all could be there and be happy in heaven together, why would you not want to have a lousy conversation? How could that be so terrible that it outweighs you saving these souls? I don't get that.
Well, some of the justifications they try are pretty interesting in some cases, where they say, "Oh, we're the closed-minded ones," or we have to find God on our own.
How would they know we're closed-minded if we don't have a debate or discussion? If you don't talk to me,
funny thing.
You can't know about me if you don't talk to me. Once again,
remember the discussion we had with Mormons about 3 months back or so, where the Mormons say, "Well, you have to pray, and then you'll find God if you're sincerely looking." But it seems like we're just fooling ourselves there into believing. How could you really distinguish that? I mean, if you're looking for it and you're hoping to find it, well then, wouldn't it come true? I mean, I can evaluate the arguments, I can evaluate the reasons. That's all well and good, but this whole deception that goes behind it is pretty ridiculous. And then what you get with the others, instead of giving reasons for belief, we'll try this, we can't know, so if we can't be sure either way, then we can just happen to believe. It's just all this going on. And what we try to do with the debate is have both sides of the issue presented, have some equal time for both parties, and get to the meat of the issue. I mean, a lot of our audience and others who happen to tune in will be able to evaluate the ideas and come up with conclusions on their own. Nobody's forced to listen, and it's a really open discussion that we had. So I was pretty happy about that. First of its kind in the area too.
Well, that's the type of thing we encourage. But hopefully in the future, maybe Reverend Dawson might return and have a new line of argument, or I guess in her case, as you said, she's going with the affirmative, so she might be able to make the same claims but have a different argument for now that she's been exposed to some of the arguments you posed.
Or perhaps a discussion about African Americans and Christianity would be an interesting one too.
She did say she never met an African American atheist before, I believe she said.
Right, she just said that, yeah.
So I don't know, maybe she might be interested in meeting one sometime in the near future and having a sit down.
She's welcome to come to meetings also, of course.
Well, that would be at a group event, but as far as a private sit down chat, live or podcast or whatever, I'd be up for something like that. I'd be more than willing to do that. That'd be to me, it'd be interesting and maybe even educational.
Right. Well, moving on to our second topic, the NEPA Freethought Society, with support from American atheists and individual donors, is going to be launching an ad campaign in Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, on County of Lackawanna transportation system buses with a very simple and really, really, really inoffensive, content-free message. The ad will say, "Atheists," with the websites and names of the NEPA Freethought Society and American Atheists. This idea was inspired by Richard Wade, writing on the Friendly Atheist blog, who originally had wondered how people would react to ads, for example, with cute puppies that just happened to contain the name of an atheist group. I decided to run with this idea, but rather have a plain background and the word atheist to confirm, if possible, whether people are angry with the word atheist or that atheists are advertising. Currently, we're waiting on a response from the bus company's board of directors, and after that, we'll be going ahead collecting donations and putting the ads up on buses. And this should be a pretty interesting social experiment, advertising campaign, and so much more all in one. And I call this the perfect storm because the same bus company is running a God Bless America message on the scrolling text of their buses. So if they're going to permit a message like that, they should have no problem permitting our ads on the buses. And as we've seen in 2009, when the NEPA Freethought Society challenged the constitutionality of a holiday display at the Luzerne County Courthouse, I was the spokesperson for that issue, and I received all sorts of hate mail, threats. I was called the third most hated person in Luzerne County, so I wonder how people are going to react this time around with a simple advertisement on a bus.
Well, like I said, it will be interesting to find out how it's going to play out. From what I've seen, the billboard, mock-up for the billboard, it seems pretty simple and plain. It just gives the word atheist and tells you that you can contact a local organization as well as a national organization if you want to get involved to whatever degree you're interested in. So I don't really see how it could be offensive to someone unless they want to make up something. I can't see a legitimate reason to gripe about that.
Well, I'm sure some of the reasons, and call me a psychic because now I'm predicting the future, let's see if I'm right, is that people don't want to ride buses with these ads and that they shouldn't have to be exposed to things like this. And, we're just being pushy and forcing our beliefs on other people. I anticipate some of the reasons being.
Well, we're not pushy. We're not forcing anything on anyone. We're just putting some information out there that we think people could use in the event they're not aware of the fact that we're here and American atheists are here. And for those who are interested, you can come and join us and be involved, like I said before, to whatever level you're interested in or degree. But for those who aren't interested, who are into something else, let's say church or religion for that matter, they're still more than entitled to continue doing what they've been doing. No one's stopping them from going to church or praying or believing. They can keep doing what they've been doing. If they don't want to ride the bus because of what it says on the side of it, that's their prerogative as well. I guess they'll find alternate transportation, but I don't know why that'll be necessary. When the people who were in charge of putting the signs on the bus put the sign there that said "God bless America," I didn't hear anybody complain about that as far as saying we can't ride the bus because it says that on the side. You rode the bus, correct?
Right.
Were they on the side that stopped you from riding the bus?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. So for them to sit there and say, well, we have a problem with spending our dollar something to get from here to there because what a billboard says on the side is ridiculous. The billboard is, like I said, pretty innocuous. Doesn't have anything on it that I personally say somebody could point out and complain about. But we'll find out.
Well, one thing that's interesting is bus ads like this, although quite different, went up on buses before, saying messages of good without God, millions of Americans are good without God, join the club, things like that. And people got quite infuriated. They vandalized the billboards. Some bus drivers have refused to drive the buses. And now what we're doing is we're having an intentionally inoffensive message to see how exactly this pans out, advertise the organizations, and just make ourselves known.
Well, I've lived here since 1975 in Northeast PA, and I've seen all sorts of billboards and ads for churches and religious functions going on, and come to our church and join us. We have this going on. That's a common thing, but I have never, to my recollection, seen a secular sign in our area, especially on a bus. That's any buses riding around. So basically, there's a problem with us having one sign or a few signs on some buses, even though theists have signs that promote their beliefs everywhere. So to me, that sounds a little ridiculous for them to sit there and cry about a few signs that promote a group or a couple of groups that are here looking to involve people who are of the same mind.
I mean, all we're asking is for equal time for free thought here. And it's not even like we're putting up an ad that says God is an imaginary friend or belief in God is a delusion or something similar to that. I mean, this is a pretty tame, content-free advertisement.
There's no message in it. There isn't. I mean, technically, there's no message. It says, basically, if you are one of us, here's where to find us. That's right. Basically what I mean. That's a message, but at the same time, it's not giving any instructions on, don't believe in this or leave them alone, don't talk to them, nothing like that. It's just saying, here we are. If you're one of us and you want to get together, here's how to contact us, and that's pretty much it. So, like I said, we'll find out what goes on after, if and or when it goes down. But once again, given the fact that theists have signs everywhere of all sorts of shapes and sizes on highways, streets, in businesses, for us to have, for the first time, because like I said, I don't recall any other promotion like this in Northeast PA, where you had it advertised definitely on a bus that groups existed, one local and one national. So to me, it seems pretty one-sided on their part. Maybe they have nothing better to do with themselves than to worry about a few signs on a bus. Because like I said, the buses have all sorts of signs on them. They might find signs in there that they consider to be offensive also. Maybe they might see a scantily dressed woman on the side of a bus. Think that's wrong, but we're not doing that. So I guess once again, it's like everybody has their own opinions. They vary. I mean, they're entitled to their opinion. But if it doesn't make any sense, it doesn't make any sense.
They're not entitled to their own facts, that's for sure. Of course, people have their own judgments about what they like and what's appropriate and things like that. But the facts here are that this bus company, Colts, is an entity in some way of the county, right? They receive county funding, state funding, federal funding, and they can't just discriminate on the basis of a message that goes up on a bus. Mm-hmm. I mean, this will also test their advertising policy, too, in a way. It's quite weird and vague because the advertising policy says that they can reject messages that are controversial, that lead to an open debate, and everything like that. And, well, I wonder, can it be the case that anything could lead to a public debate or could be considered offensive? So in this society, we value free speech and say that the government can't discriminate on the basis of message if they put out some advertising space.
As I said, I've heard people complain about advertisement these days where they'll say, like I said a minute ago, scantily dressed people in advertisements. They'll say, well, what type of role model are we setting for our children? It's all sex these days. You can't get away from it. It's television, it's radio, it's billboards, it's everything. So I guess in this case, when you're looking at the bus, it's not that. They can't say, well, turn away, children. Don't look at that. It's a horrible image. We can't have you looking at that. They can't claim that unless they're just concerned about the kids seeing the word and asking what the word means, and that might spark the fire. Okay.
But it's okay for them to put, basically go to church or burn in hell or anything like that, or some dead fetuses.
Well, that's a good point, because I mean, if the bus company is able to put "God Bless America" on the bus, I would assume they'd have no problem with somebody putting any type of religious sign on the bus as long as they had the money to pay for it. Then.
Sure.
I don't know if they would need to have a board meeting about that they need to put a religious sign on there. I mean, as long as it wasn't offensive, it was just said, we're the so-and-so church, come to our church, come to our God, or whatever. I actually do see things like that. Now I don't see people uprising about it. There's no uproars. So
we see atheists boycotting buses or anything like that.
We're not vandalizing them. And if we are, I guess we're pretty slick, because I don't recall anybody catching us and saying, they're specifically secular. We got them, and we've identified them. They're from an organization, and we know who these people are. I've never heard that. So they can't rely on that crutch there. So, that's usually them that get upset and want to go out and creep around at night with spray cans and whatever else they're using at the time.
I mean, one could argue even that McDonald's advertisements are offensive or not proper because they're making children obese, or it's just unhealthy, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, they used to have the character Grimace,
right?
And he was a pretty overweight guy, or whatever he was supposed to be.
I think he was a chicken McNugget, actually.
Okay. But like you said, there's things that pictures or children could see.
You have the Hamburglar. I mean, he was a thief. Doesn't he inspire children to steal things?
I guess if you're hungry, steal.
That's the message.
And it's something you like.
The Cookie Monster, I mean, just overindulge. Christians wouldn't like gluttony, I guess, because there's a verse in the Bible that's along the lines of you should slit your throat before you be eating so much. And I don't really see Christians out there protesting Super King's Buffet or Old Country Buffet or anything like that.
Oh, it goes on and on and on.
It's the year of the Bible. Come on.
So some say. I don't know where they had the business to say that. what business they had saying that, other than that's what they wanted to be. But that's what they tried to say or trying to say. Yeah, as far as these images go, though, when people are looking at things as they're going through their daily routines every day, I don't think that they should be so upset about something like the sign we want to put up. They should just look at it.
They could come to our website and actually, understand why we're putting it up, what we believe. They can listen to our podcast. They can go on our forums.
They can not do more than they can actually contact us.
Right. Ask some questions.
That's why they can level any questions or criticisms they may like, as long as it's done in a civil manner. We'd be more than happy to discuss it or debate it or whatever you want to do. Answer some questions.
That's not what happened last time with the nativity, of course. There were people coming on our message boards on meetup.com. I recall banning people from the message boards because they were spamming, they were just being abusive and things like that.
Those were the ignorant ones.
Well, I expect more of these to come through in the future.
Yeah, so do I. But there's always gonna be ignorant ones, I guess. But yeah, we're gonna have that. You're gonna have that. Some people just don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to be civil about it, or pretty much look at something and evaluate it and say, well, I don't like it, and here's what the problem I have with it. They have to become violent, or just ignorant, and call you sorts of names. I saw some of the comments they made about you and to you, so it was just out of hand. They're supposed to be loving Christians. I guess they don't have to be a loving Christian towards you because you're not a Christian, I guess.
Right. It's like red state, right?
Yeah, I guess that's part
we
of the
don't
deal.
count.
That must be part of the deal. You only have to love your own brother if he claims to be like you. So I guess that's where they're at with that one. But either way you look at it, if you look back at everything that was said and the things they said, a perfect example would be the one guy who was actually, I believe you said, was in the military who claimed...
The Marines, yeah.
The Marines said the courthouse's religion is...
Yes, the courthouse religion is Catholic.
Is Catholic. I mean, I don't know how ridiculous that is on so many levels, but once again, that boils down to either education or he knew better and has decided to make an extremely ignorant statement because he was so upset that he couldn't do anything. He couldn't say anything better than that.
Well, I was on the Atheist Experience discussing this back in 2009, or perhaps it was January 2010, and one of the co-hosts on the show, I believe it was Jen Peoples, it might have been Tracy Harris, one of those individuals said something like, well, he signed up to defend the Constitution, but he doesn't understand that which he's defending. This the courthouse religion is Catholic comment, and all these personal attacks and everything else. And unfortunately, that seems to be par for the course of being an activist and putting advertisements out there. I mean, we Christians, if they were to put a billboard out there, you probably wouldn't hear a peep. I mean, some people might make fun of the billboard or something like that, depending on its content. But I mean, they're not going to get death threats over it. They're not going to get violence. People aren't going to go crazy and boycott buses and all this other nonsense.
No.
So
maybe they're in shock because the group is new and that they never encountered a group like us before, or our agenda is new to them. So given that they're in shock, they don't know how to respond, and that they don't know how to cope with that. So they lash out.
I mean, one good thing that comes across are theists who actually will agree on some of these issues. And, one of the most beneficial experiences, I think, if you will, is when a theist comes up to me and says, hey, I don't agree with you on all the issues, but on this I agree with you. And hopefully we'll get some of the people out there who are the quote-unquote moderate theists or moderate Catholics.
That's a starting point. That's a good thing. If they can agree at least on one thing,
yeah.
Start from there.
I mean, I don't expect everybody to agree on everything, of course. But, I mean, in this case, this should be an issue where the theists should come out and say, hey, this shouldn't be a problem. And if some pastors of churches or whomever else were to come out and argue against it or write letters into the paper complaining, we would expect these people to come out and say, hey, stop that. That's not the right way to behave. Why shouldn't they be able to advertise just like you? And perhaps, after the first month of us putting up ads, they'll put up ads too, and we'll wonder if they have to wait for approval or anything like that. I mean, it's been about a week and a half, 2 weeks now, just waiting. And now it's just to the board of directors to make the decision. Mm-hmm. And if they decide that these ads aren't going to go up, they're going to have some kind of issues, because there have been cases in Pennsylvania before where bus companies have been sued, brought to court, etc., because they refused advertisement to groups, and they can't do that.
Well, as I said before, obviously they had no problem with posting "God Bless America," so they were in favor of that. If these are public buses, these aren't private buses, public, so the public isn't privy to anything specific. I mean, like you said before, if it's not something that just goes completely against their code, then I would think that the only way they would reject it is if it was they had a personal problem with it, if you ask me. Because I don't see any other way around it. They can't say, well, we don't like it, and here's why. We're going to pinpoint the problem and point out to you and say, well, this is messed up. That's why we can't put it up there. It'd be interesting, like I said, once you get the word back, and that should be sometime soon. We'll find out then. But in the meantime, all we can do is just speculate and wait.
A lot of atheists have been really supportive, and even though I haven't collected any monies yet because I want to wait for approval in case there's any hang up or anything like that.
Of course.
We've gotten a lot of support. A lot of people have stepped forward wanting to donate, and we're going to wait about a week to accept donations, I believe. And then from there, we're going to put up the signs. So
hopefully they'll get their chance to donate.
Right.
Everything goes according to plan.
Right, but unfortunately some atheists don't like the idea. Of course not everyone's going to like anything, not everyone's going to like everything. But some people said, if you're going to be spending the money, why don't you put up a more positive message instead of a neutral, content-free message? But again, the idea of this is to just be as mild as possible, see what exactly the response will be, and perhaps this can draw a different crowd of atheists who don't want to be so provocative or controversial or whatever else. And it's advertisement for the organizations, so I don't think we can go wrong there.
I agree with you.
All right. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the NEPA Freethought Society Podcast.